Life is suffering. Right. Indisputable. What do you do about that? You voluntarily accept it and then strive to overcome the suffering that's a consequence of that. And you do that for you, and you do that in a way that makes it better for other people. And then that works. And one question might be, well, how well does it work? And the answer is, the only way that you can find out is by trying it. That's it. That's the existential element of it. The proof is to be derived by the incarnation of the attitude in your own life. No one can tell you how it will work for you. It's the thing that your destiny is to discover that. And you have to make the decisions to begin with. It's like, because you can't do this without commitment. You have to commit to it first. That's the act of faith that Kierkegaard was so insistent upon. You have to say, I'm going to act as if being is good. I'm going to act as if truth is the pathway to enlightenment. I'm going to act as if I should pursue the deepest meaning possible in my life. And there's reasons to do none of those. They're real reasons. So it's really a decision. But you can't find out what the consequence of the decision is unless you make the decision. I think the same thing happens when you get married, by the way. So if you think you might leave, you're not married. And then you think, well, the marriage didn't succeed. It's like, well, maybe you were never married. Because the rule is, you don't get to leave. And there's a reason for that rule. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't situations where there should be exceptions made for that. That's not the point. The point is that there's some games you don't get to play unless you're all in. And the other thing that's so interesting about being alive is that you're all in. No matter what you do, you're all in. This is going to kill you. So I think you might as well play the most magnificent game you can while you're waiting. Because do you have anything better to do? Really? Why not pick the best thing possible that you could do? Why not do that? Maybe you could justify your wretched existence to yourself that way. I think you could. That's what it looks like. You know, people find such meaning in the responsibilities they adopt. It stops making them ask questions about what life is for. If you have a newborn child, for example, like unless you're really in a bad way, psychotically depressed, or maybe your personality really needs some retooling, you stop thinking about anything but ensuring that that baby is doing well. And if someone comes along and asks you an existential question about your commitment to that, the right response is, why are you asking me such stupid questions when this is manifesting itself right in front of your eyes? Like, how blind can you be? That isn't a time for questions about the meaning of life. The answer is right in front of you. And if you can't see it, it's not because life has no meaning, it's because you're blind. I mean, that's what the image of the Virgin Mother and the child is all about. It's like, what's the answer to the meaning of life? Here's an answer. It's like, well, I'm going to criticize that. Well, go right ahead. You know, it's like what you're like a what do you call that? A termite gnawing on a temple. There's no utility in that sort of criticism. It's blindness. And it's the same thing with regards to the path of the hero. It's like it glistens in front of you and you can criticize it. It's like, fine. Put the cart before the horse and see how far you get. So I thought, to bring full closure to the class, I was trying to solve this terrible puzzle that confronted me and many other people about how it was that human beings got themselves in such a tangle about what they believed. Such a tangle that we were pointing the ultimate weapons of destruction at one another, which, by the way, we are still doing. And I thought, okay, well, I understand that. We need our belief systems. They orient us. And that means there will be conflict between belief systems, and that can be a catastrophe. And that's being played out everywhere, again, in very many ways. What's the solution to that? Well, one possibility is there's no solution. It's just mayhem all the way around. Could be the case. But it seemed to me, as I delved into it, that the proper solution to that was to live properly as an individual, because you're more powerful than you think. Way more powerful than you think. I mean, God only knows what you are in the final analysis. You're blind to your own weaknesses, but you're also blind to your own strengths. And so then I think, well, if you got your act together, it'd be better for you, and instantly it would be better for your family, assuming they wanted you to get your act together, and not everyone does, and then it would be better for the community. It's like, how far could you take that? If you stopped wasting time, and if you stopped lying, and if you oriented yourself to the highest possible good that you could conceive of, and you committed to that, how much good could you do? Well, I would say, why don't you find out? So that's what I think you should do. You should find out. You don't have anything better to do. And there's nothing in it, as far as I've been able to tell, there's nothing in it but good. So maybe you could sort yourself out so that you wanted nothing but the good. And then maybe you could help make that manifest in the world. And maybe we wouldn't have all these terrible problems then. At least we'd have fewer of them, and that would be a start. So it's the answer to the problem of humanity is the integrity of the individual. That's the answer. So, and states that are predicated on that realization are healthy. So, and states that aren't are doomed to stagnation and catastrophic collapse. And personalities that are predicated on self-tyranny and the tyranny of others are doomed to collapse. So, and then you think, well, what's the barrier? And the barrier is, are you willing to accept the responsibility? And part of the answer to that is, reduce the damn responsibility until it's tolerable. You don't have to fix everything at once. You could just start by fixing the things that you could fix. Or you could even do it more. You could do it with even less self-sacrifice. You could start by fixing only the things that you want to fix. God, you can get a massive way that way. So do it. See what happens. That's what you should have been taught in university right from the beginning. It's like, aim at the highest good. Tool yourself into something that can attain it. And go out there and manifest it in the world. And everything that comes your way will be a blessing. And so you have to remember, when you watch something like this movie, not a single bit of it is random or accidental. None of it. Because, you know, they had to draw, I don't remember how many frames per second these things are, 30 maybe. Maybe it's a little less than that, but it's high quality animation. And so someone had to paint 30 pictures to get a second of this. You're not doing that accidentally. It's really expensive. And everyone has to agree on exactly what's going to happen. And you might say, well, do the people who are doing this consciously know what they're doing? And the answer to that is, well, sort of, just like you do. You know, it's yes, they know, and no, they don't. And they know because they're really smart and gifted and all that, but they don't know because it's not all articulated, plus they're working in a group. So they know and don't know, just like you do when you're watching it, and so and when you do anything else. So now they're also guided by what you might call, they're guided by their unconscious in the Freudian and in the cognitive way, partly because your unconscious value structures determine the direction and content of your perceptions. And so it's built right into the way you move your eyes, because you tend to look at things you value, right? Or at things you're afraid of. Like you look at things with valence, and part of the decision about what has value is dependent on the implicit structure of your moral system, because morality is about what's good and what isn't, and that's been partly a conscious construction of you, but it's partly something you've picked up by interacting with people like mad ever since you were born. You don't know all the rules any more than the damn cricket did. You just don't, and you can't, because you're too complicated. But you act them out, and then you also have representations of how people act in your imagination. Dreams are, that's what a dream is, that's what a fantasy is. That's what that little movie that plays inside your head when you remember what you did is. And you only remember the gist, you know. So even the imagistic representation of your behavior in your past, which is basically your episodic memory, it's already selecting and molding and turning it into a relatable story. It can't help but do that. It's the only way you can represent it. And so you don't know how you do that or why you do that, but part of it's governed by this implicit morality that's part of your procedural memory system, part of the way you act and part of the way you move your eyes and listen to things and focus on them. And that's all being instantiated inside of you because of this immense social, your biology, but also this immense social project that you're continually engaged in. And so that informs what you remember, it informs what you imagine, it informs what we collectively imagine, it informs what we can collectively understand. And partly what you're doing while you become conscious of yourself is to map the implicit structures that already constitute you from society into explicit representation. That's what self-understanding means. And you know, when you have that moment of insight about something you've done, it's like you're watching this repetitive behavior that you've manifested, probably that got you in trouble. You know, it's your characteristic way of falling accidentally into chaos, and you talk about it, and your problems, you talk about them with your friends, you talk about them, and maybe you have dreams about them, and you're trying to relate them, and you have memories about them that you can't get rid of because they're negatively toned, and so you talk about them, and then someone comes up with a little statement that links them together causally, and you think, aha, that's what I'm doing. And then maybe you can stop doing it, or at least maybe then you can think up some strategies for not doing it anymore. But it's not like you know, it's like you're acting it out. You know it that way. But until the representation matches that pattern, that click of insight doesn't occur. And that's like a revelation. It's a really good way of thinking about it, because the knowledge is there in its implicit form, and all of a sudden, bang, it's been made explicit as a fantasy maybe, or also as a set of semantic statements. You know, maybe you have a crush on someone and you don't notice it, and maybe you find yourself having a fantasy about them. You think, oh, that means something, that indicates something. Maybe you don't want to know that that's what you want, but the fantasy will tell you. And one of the things Jung suggested, and this is sort of out of the Freudian tradition of free associations, is watch yourself, watch your fantasies, because they're always happening. And they'll tell you something. And so one of the things I do when I'm interacting with my clients is we'll have a discussion, and then their eyes will drift a little bit, and I'll know that something's flitted through their mind, you know, and that means we've touched on something that has a multiplicity of elements. And so I'll stop and say, look, I noticed that maybe you teared up. That's another thing to really watch. Or maybe you laughed, or you drifted at least. It's because some other thought has entered your field of consciousness. And then if you can get the person to grab those thoughts, to notice them, then you can often figure out the avenues along which that particular conversation might unfold. That's a complex. That's a Jungian complex or a psychoanalytic complex. It's like there's an emotional core that produces a whole range of associated ideas, and that thing's got a life. It's like a micro-personality, and it might have resentment in it, might have anger. It's often negative emotion tinged, because though negative emotion tinged episodes are still problems, and they will emerge automatically because your threat detection systems force them onto your consciousness, essentially. So you watch, and when you drift, you'll drift, and the fantasy is partly a representation of the problem space. You know that happens when you wake up at 3 in the morning and you're worried about things, right? Because actually what happens is you wake up during threat processing. And if you're depressed, actually that gets so intense you can't sleep. So then you just lay there all night worrying. Not fun. And those are fantasies about the negative elements of your past, present, and future. And the fantasies can also breed solutions. And that's partly why Freud regarded dreams as wish fulfillments. It's partly, and he wasn't, that was where he stopped. It's not correct. It's partially correct. It's like the fantasy will provide you with a problem and a potential solution, but they're more like problem identification mechanisms, the fantasies, with the possibility of a solution built in. And so a way of thinking about that is that you can generate potential futures. So they're like each segregatable environments according to the rules of your fantasy. Then you can generate little avatars of yourself that inhabit each of those little universes, and you can run them as simulations. And then you can watch what happens in the simulation, and if it's a catastrophe, then you don't have to act it out. And that's not exactly, that's akin to what you're doing when you go watch a movie, except that is much more coherent and well thought through, you know, than just a dream, which is often quite fragmentary. And that's partly because the dream is willing to sacrifice coherence to play with category structures, and that's why in dreams things can change from one thing into another really weirdly, or scenes can change from one scene into another without a logic. The logic gets loosened so that the expanse of your thinking can widen, and it's dangerous to do that, and that's partly why you do it when you're asleep and paralyzed. You don't run around and act out your pseudopodal fantasies, where you're stretching yourself out into the world. There's no risk exactly, and so although it can be bad enough so you wake up in terror, but that's better than being in a crocodile's mouth by a large margin. Okay, so the question is, can that sense of meaning be hijacked? And the answer to that is absolutely, absolutely, because you could say that the ultimate sense of meaning is composed of the union of fragmentary senses of meaning, and the fragmentary senses of meaning can be overwhelmingly powerful. Anger, sexual lust, and the sorts of things that you experience when you're playing a video game, which are very carefully calibrated to keep you on the edge of exploration, let's say. Now, I'm not a foe of video games, because games are complicated and it isn't clear what people are doing when they're playing them. They may be expanding their cognitive skills, they may be learning to cooperate, they may be learning to engage in complex problem solving, and so, but part of it's also a matter of balance. 50 hours a week, probably not, unless you're going to go pro, right? Because there's other things you need to be attending to. It's not a stable solution for you, your family, your society. It's too one-sided. Yeah, and you can get pulled down rabbit holes of all sorts that are one-sided pursuits of meaning. So, and it's something we're actually going to talk about as the later classes unfold. The question is, how do you stop yourself from falling prey to a pathologized sense of meaning? And I think one of the answers to that is don't lie. Because what you're hoping is that your nervous system is sufficiently healthy and well programmed so that what it reads out to you is reliable. And if you pathologize your psyche by either through sins of omission, let's say, or outright deception, you're going to warp that internal structure and it's not going to read out properly to you. And then your sense of meaning will lead you astray. So like one of the reasons for speaking the truth, I shouldn't say that because you don't know how to speak the truth, but you do know how not to lie. And it's a game you're playing with yourself. You can define the damn lies. No one else has to do that for you. You try not to utter falsehoods because you warp your neurological structure by doing so, and then it will read out pathologically, and then if you rely on it to guide you, it will run you right off a cliff. So that's why there's a moral element to this, is if you're going to rely on your sense of meaning, make sure that you don't pollute the mechanism. See, this is partly why people go to confession, right? Which is like I said, a psychotherapeutic technique. It's like, okay, what stupid, miserable, wretched things did I do this week? Well, that's a good thing to make conscious, right? Because maybe you can not do them the next week. And you think, well, why would you bother? It's like, well, you're in a ship. It's sailing across the stormy seas. If you're hacking holes in it with a pickaxe, you should probably pay attention to that before you sink. So it's a good idea to keep what you're doing that's stupid in mind so that you can stop doing it. And so then you can more and more rely on yourself and your own, your own conscience, let's say, as a guide to proper action. In the Pinocchio story is that the conscience was not an unerring guide for Pinocchio. It had to learn. And so it's also partly pushing yourself into new situations and differentiating yourself so that you get wiser. And so it's courage as well as truth. Those might be the two. There's more. Beauty, courage, truth, the fundamental virtues. Yeah. Why be virtuous? That's the question. It's so that you can bear the suffering of life without becoming corrupt. Right? It's practical. It's practical. There's nothing more practical than that. So, unless you want misery, and people do, it's exciting, misery. So, I love my child, I love my mother so much that I couldn't survive if anything happened to them. It's like, you have some serious thinking to do about that. It's like, you really want to curse someone with that kind of love, do you? I couldn't live without you. It's like, my God, get away from me. Really. It's terrible. That's the Oedipal mother, right? That's like, I'll forgive you no matter what you do. It's like, really? No matter what I do, eh? You are not my friend. That's for sure. Not at all. It's a horrible thing to do to someone. That's the witch in the Hansel and Gretel story. All gingerbread and outside to the lost kid. Inside, you feed them candy and make them fat and eat them. Right, that's Hansel and Gretel. That's the Oedipal mother. That's one of Freud's major discoveries. It's a major discovery. It's like the devouring force of love. You want the person to be able to stand on their own, and the price you pay for that is that you stand on your own. It's like, good to have you around. I'm glad you're here, but if tragedy, if and when tragedy strikes either of us, I hope that one of us is standing when it blows past. And that there's a harshness about that that's unbelievably cruel, because you say, well, if my mother died, I could live. Well, what kind of monster are you exactly? The death of your mother doesn't do you in? Well, it turns out that being a monster is the right thing. So, and that's a rough thing to learn, but it's necessary to learn. Because it also makes you, at some point, for example, as you get older, by the time you're in your mid-20s, something like that, you should start having a relationship with your parents that's approximately one of peers. And you can tell if you have that, so here's a little trick you can use. So you have parents, obviously, they have friends. You probably care what your parents think, I would imagine. Do you care what their friends think of you? And the answer to that is, well, not nearly as much. And so then I would say, well, why do you care what your parents think of you then? They're the same people. You know what I mean? It's just luck of the draw that your parents are someone else's kids' friends. They don't think the same way about them that you do. Well, that's where you see that you have a projection, right? If by the time you're 30, if what your parents think of you matters more than what, say, a random set of their friends think of you, then you've still got your parents confused with God. That's one way of looking at it. You've still got them confused with an archetype, and you're still a child. And you might think, well, it's pretty damn rude not to think about what your parents think of you anymore, not to care. It's like, yeah, it's kind of rude, but maybe you'll be useful for them when they get old. And that's a much better form of caring. It's like you're going to be independent enough and strong enough and detached enough so that when the power dynamic shifts, which it will, that you'll be the person that can carry things forward. Well, you can't do a better thing for them than that,